Life Audio.
Hello, and welcome to the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast. I am your host, John Seidel. This is your home for real stories, radical vulnerability, and remarkable comebacks. In the end, this podcast is a place for the desperate, the downtrodden, the destitute, and especially the drunk. But it's also a place of hope and healing. I know that firsthand because I'm the Christian who became an alcoholic, not the other way around. Today, I've found sobriety after decades of struggling. But more importantly than finding sobriety, I found Jesus. My prayer is that as I interview people just like you and just like me, along with professionals in the fields of trauma, faith, and addiction recovery, you will find the peace that is available to you through Christ on the other side of whatever you're going through and whatever addiction that might be. Because let's face it, we're all addicted to something. So welcome. Let's get radically vulnerable as we explore what it looks like to be on this journey of messy sanctification. We'll be right back after this. What would you do if you lost the ability to walk? What would you do if everything that really came to define who you are was gone in a year? That is, a big part of the question and the questions that today's guest was forced to grapple with. Kimberly Phinney is a beautiful writer. She is just an incredible poet. And she pretty much lost everything, including the ability to walk, the ability to lift her head because of chronic illness. And so what does that have to do with addiction, you might be asking? And that's a great question. And what I would say is it was actually that coming to the end of herself physically that forced her to deal with what she calls some shiny addictions in her life. The addictions that we tend to see as socially acceptable, the workaholism, the people-pleasing, the perfectionism. And so Kimberly today is going to talk about the addictions that she had that pushed her to not just the edge, but into the abyss of a nervous breakdown. And then how a chronic illness and, coming to the point where physically she could not live the way that she was able to live, and how that forced her to deal with her shiny addictions. And I am really, invested in this episode because unfortunately my wife has dealt with many of the issues that Kimberly has. In fact, they share a chronic diagnosis together. And so the surgeries that Kimberly talks about are surgeries that my wife has gone through as well. And so this is an interesting episode. It crosses over addictions, chronic illness, and suffering. And I think you will be really encouraged. So if you've had an addiction, this is for you. If you've had one of those soft, shiny addictions, this is for you. If you've dealt with chronic illness, this is for you. And if you've dealt with suffering in any way, this is for you. And so I'm so excited and honored that Kimberly, she shares things in this podcast that she hasn't shared with anyone else before. She's open, she's vulnerable, and I'm really confident that this is going to help people who are listening. So, without further ado, Kimberly Phinney. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining the Confessions of a Christian Alcoholic podcast. I'm really honored to have you on here. We've been Substack friends for a while, which I'm learning is you can have friends on social media and, you have Facebook friends and Instagram friends and LinkedIn connections. But what I love about Substack is that it is legitimately, I feel like a place where these online friends you really connect with. And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, I just so appreciate you being on here.
Thank you. I am so grateful to be here today, and I love your work.
And I know we can take this, and we will take this interview in a lot of different places. And I kind of set that up a little bit in the introduction. But you're someone that I think can speak to so many aspects of what this podcast is about. But also, I think, and I'm really excited about this, is to bring in a new aspect, and that is a discussion on chronic illness and chronic disease.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who has myself been affected by that with my wife, and so when you and I started chatting about this, we're obviously going to talk about addictions, and we're obviously going to talk about your work and what you're doing in to get your counseling doctorate, and that aspect. But I'm really excited to also kind of open up a new door. And so thank you for being willing to go there.
Absolutely. I think it's going to be a great discussion today. So thank you.
Now, where are you joining us from again?
So we are full-time in Tampa, but our hearts are in the Blue Ridge. So we part-time there. My family lived there for a while, out in Brevard, Asheville area. And so, and the goal is to eventually get back to the Carolinas. So full-time Tampa, and our hearts are in the mountains.
I love it. My heart, I feel like people, a lot of people are like beach or mountains, and you're just like both.
Yeah. Yeah. I did the beach thing. I was a beach girl coming up here since I was 5. We're from Boston. We moved though when I was 5. So I've been a beach Florida girl forever, and I love it. And of course, you're not going to have any dispute from me about the beaches, but now I am like, give me my mountains.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I want to dive into your story, and it's like, I don't think it's necessarily going to be all like pretty and linear, because I think so much stuff overlaps. But when we talk about your story when it comes to addiction, you don't have, in a sense, the traditional addiction story of drugs, of alcohol, that kind of thing. But when you and I started talking, you talked about, kind of these, what I think some people would say, and I'm not endorsing this, but more they say these are like the softer addictions, right? These are the ones that sometimes I think in a sense can be more dangerous because they're more socially acceptable. And they don't have the big necessarily destructive side effects that you can see. But when you talk about your addictions, I want you to talk about that. What is it that you found yourself addicted to?
So I would say it's like the shiny side of addiction, because again, in doses and the way it can look on the outside is like, oh, wow, this person is so successful, or they really have it together, but they don't realize that it's because there's an unbelievable monster inside that's driving us to do the things that we're doing. It's not coming from a healthy place. So for me, it is that potpourri of perfectionism, workaholism, people pleasing, and even to an extent vanity, which was, exercising and only feeling good about myself when I could put on the armor of a professional attire or makeup, or feeling like I was a certain amount on the scale. And sadly, that collection or constellation did drive me to a complete mental breakdown, and were things that I struggled through. And what's interesting is my physical health journey has eclipsed the mental illness that I struggled with because of my shiny addictions. But the reason why is because they were slaughtered at the foot of the cross through the physical illness, which is wild. And in that way, to talk about something that Paul J. Pastor, the poet of the Locust Years, and he's an editor, had just said, is that sometimes our suffering is the perfect garment crafted just for us. Oh. Not because our Savior doesn't love us, but because he loves us that much. And that hit me like a ton of bricks in our conversation, because so many times we look at suffering like this, especially for me with acute suffering, as this is the albatross around my neck. This is horrific. Why me? And I still do have those moments. Okay. I'm not trying to paint myself like a saint. I cry and lament just as much as I have joy and try to speak into other people. It's very much both. But my physical illness forced me to shatter my addictions. And I didn't know that they were as bad as they were, even though I knew they were bad, but I didn't know about all of them until the physical illness and being bedridden and losing my identity and losing like public esteem and being gossiped about or slandered. I didn't know what a god I made all of that
Yeah.
until it was all, taken away within a very short period of time because of my physical illness. So,
Oh, already some
yeah.
great quotes. Here we go. We're 10 minutes about in, and great.
You
So
can
I
always
want to,
count on the poet.
yeah, right. I want to get back to that, but I want to come to that aspect of the suffering. But I want to put a pin in that and just go back a little bit.
Sure.
And can you walk us through? I mean, walk us through, in a sense, what led to your mental breakdown. What brought you to that point where you started to see, oh my gosh, I've been the workaholic. I've been the people
Oh,
pleaser.
absolutely.
I've been what did that look like?
So that would be like in my late 20s, that at the veneer of everything of me running so hard that I ran into a brick wall kind of unraveled. And I went through some very traumatic things as a child. And that we'll just leave it at that because I feel like I'm still trying to privately unpack some things. But, I think leaving it at that, though, makes it very universal that a lot of us can speak into, generational pain and things like that, and seeking for identity and security and being exposed to things maybe we shouldn't have been. And then you take that with the way that the Lord made me is I'm a sensitive, very aware feeling person, with a brain that gets me into trouble if I don't give it good things to do. It's a little bit of the little engine that could, and it doesn't want to calm down. It always wants to be reasoning and learning. And I have learned, and I tell my husband, and he knows this about me, you got to put that brain into the good stuff right now, because if I don't give it that to do, it really does want to do the self-destruction stuff. And so I did not understand that until I had wisdom and went through things. So in my 20s, I was just voraciously, maybe if I get all A's, I'll get more love or security or feel more rooted or have more identity. Then if I'm the top of my class, maybe that will get me the love or the attention that I'm seeking. And looking for my place in the world. And then you go into a high stress job. Teaching is stressful anyway, but I took a job at 22, 23 working with inner city at-risk kids. I did that for 10 years. I do not regret it. But I will tell you, guns on campus, watching people be bloodied, being struck by students, cursed by students, threatened by students. It takes a toll on you. So I think, again, though, I didn't want to quit. And so that's where the workaholism and the deep sense of pleasing and being in control, it just fed into this horrible cycle of trying to get the best test scores and have the best student feedback and being beloved. It fed. Now, those things are not bad. That's why I said it's the shiny side of addiction, because, my mind, sleeping 4 hours a night and counting calories and being perfect, and yes to everybody. You're thinking, well, this isn't hurting anybody, but you're killing yourself.
Yeah.
And over time, I didn't even know who Kimberly was. Because at 18, my parents moved away about a week after I graduated high school to the mountains. I was in Florida still, and I had nowhere to go. So I slept on my friends' couches. I stayed with my boyfriend and his family, which he ended up being my husband. So they took me in for a while. I leaned very much on Michael, my husband. He was my best friend. he also had things that he was going through too. So it's not like, we're just trying to figure things out. And so hustling from 18 to 28 did not work out well for me.
Yeah.
And I ended up having a nervous breakdown at my parents' house one afternoon with my mom, right around 28, 29, because I was getting 4 hours of sleep at night. I weighed, 110 pounds. I was malnourished. I didn't know who I was, and my body just tapped out. I haven't really talked about this story at all because, whew, it's a big one. I don't
Yeah.
actually, it's the first time I've talked about it. So then I got counseling. I went on medication for a little while, got off because that was frightening how it numbed me. One day I was driving on the road. This is all pre my daughter, by the way. I was married at 22 with Michael. So this is all happening prior to becoming a mom. Praise the Lord. But I remember driving on the road, like home from work one day, maybe 29 at this point. I was on the medication. And I literally had a feeling that if I took this wheel and I wrenched it, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
And I sobbed all the way home. And I went and I told my husband, like, I come hell or high water, I have to get off this medication. And I know that it's given me a little more stability in this healing journey, but I am also not caring
Mm.
at all. And so he was there for me. He didn't want me on it anyway, but it was just like, you're terrified. What do I do here? This is the person that I love. This is what they're saying she needs. You know what I'm saying? And so we
Yeah.
walked me off of that. And then I got more, I did better. I kind of rebounded. It was still a thing. I still struggle with depression, anxiety through my pregnancy, but I was in a healthier position. I had my tools.
Yeah.
And then it was after I was done nursing my daughter that my disease came back. And I really went from one frying pan,
Mm.
into the other.
Yeah.
And it was through the severe physical illness that it made me face those demons and eventually overcome them.
So, feel free at any point to pass on a question. But I guess, it sounds like what you are describing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is, a type of eating disorder. You were counting calories, you weighed.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so did that come from that perfectionism? Like, where do you
Absolutely.
feel like that came? What are the roots of that?
So I've struggled with eating disorders. And again, though, what's wild is it's even hard for me to say that out loud
Mm.
because it was clouded and always felt secondary to the other monsters, which was the anxiety disorder, especially. And so to one extent, I would do the calories and to exercise and to always make sure I was 118 on the scale, no more than 125, and self-flagellation if I went above that. I know that sounds insane because I'm like 5'6", which is far too tiny. So, I would do that, and that was the perfectionism and drive. But what is frightening is that more of to my anxiety got so out of control that I had no appetite. So even when I wanted to eat, I couldn't. And there were a lot of times that I would, but my anxiety was so bad that I would get sick afterward. And my body was trained that way. And I know you talk about a lot of nuance on your show, and I think that is really important because there's such a human component. And this is how I feel when I look at the DSM. When we're talking psychology, it is a tool and it's helpful, but we shouldn't worship it because it kind of gives us a target of like who has what and why and gives us language so we can help people. But everybody's story is so specific. And so my binging and purging wasn't because I wanted to do it. It was actually because of the anxiety.
Mm.
And then my body was in the red zone and all of that cortisol was being dumped into it. And I couldn't keep food down. And I had dropped down to about 105 pounds. And that's when my husband, he was already concerned. But at that point, he was like, we're in an emergency zone now for you.
Yeah.
And and I'm watching you waste away, and it's terrifying me.
Yeah.
And this has to become like, things have to change. This has to become the number one thing where our time and energy goes. I got my weight up, and then I eventually left the public school teaching job and took a job at a small Christian school with much less stress, a much smaller, space, less responsibility out the gate because I was running a team at the other one very young. And so at 30, I made that change, and I ended up gaining 10 pounds my first year.
Hmm.
And almost so much of the issues faded away. And my infertility and the miscarriages, I didn't have those anymore. And miraculously, we got pregnant at the end of my first year teaching at that new school. So it was a very redemptive season. And now to this day, it is really interesting talking about shattering idols, as I always controlled that weight. And it was always a thing I struggled with, even when I got quote unquote healthier. I still struggle to this day. But the thing is like, I don't have any of the eating issues anymore. I'm trying to be healthy, and I'm having to make peace with the fact that I have obviously gained a lot more weight going through what I've been through. So I have to spend every day affirming my own dignity and identity in Christ, in my worthiness for the first time in my life, that it's not tied to weight or to beauty standards that are impossible. And I certainly can't always keep every promise I make because I'm ill. I can't people please. I have no capacity anymore for it. I don't have the energy, right? I certainly can't be a workaholic because I have half the capacity I did.
Yeah.
And when I do feel myself going into those addictions, because, we always have to be real with ourselves. They're there, right? They're part of the contour of who we are. I'm so limited now that I don't even have the strength to go into them. I can feel myself butting up against them. But the illness, the physical illness, and where I've grown in my faith, it's been a great buffer and a great protection, which is so ironic.
We'll be right back after this. So before we move on, I want to ask you this one question. And well, first of all, let me say, I'm glad you said what you said about the DSM. So for people who don't know, the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual, it's basically the Bible when it comes to, psychological, mental health issues. And it's funny. I spend the first chapter of my book talking about defining and redefining alcoholism, and and the DSM, at least to its credit, changed that definition and how they manage or how they diagnose it. I think specifically because of what you said, they saw that the way that they were defining and figuring out if people are quote unquote alcoholics was so binary.
Absolutely.
That it became unhelpful, that so many people were falling through the cracks. So they changed it to a spectrum. And so I think even that critique that you say of the DSM is okay, right? Because like up until 2013, the DSM when it came to alcohol was missing the mark.
And that's why they're on so many editions, because we're human and we're trying to figure it out. And so there has been more nuance, which is good, but I still think we want to always be aware that we see the human first.
So this is a question, and I don't, however you answer it is how you answer it, but you said all of this in a sense leads to this nervous breakdown that you have. What does, we hear that term. What did that look like for you? And I think it can look different for people, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, for me, there was the physical failure. My body completely shut down, and I weighed far too little. I was not sleeping, and if anybody's ever had an anxiety attack before, you feel like you're getting thrown off a cliff. Some people experience blacking out. Some people get sick. Some people just stare into space and convulse. For me, it was getting ill, which was what was so dangerous, is it would trigger me throwing up. And I was having, toward the end, I was having an anxiety attack, maybe 5 days a week.
Oh,
So I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't know who I was, and it had swallowed me whole, really. And I didn't. The really scary thing is what you start to believe about yourself. And to this, I would love to address shame,
yeah.
because whenever I talk to people I'm helping or like counseling or anybody who's going through this, or if I get an opportunity like this, there's the disease or the addiction or the trauma, and then there's the shame. And I think that we have to address both of them, because as long as the blanket of shame is covering whatever it is we're going through, it's going to block true healing because of the things we're telling ourselves and the things that
Absolutely.
we're keeping secret. And, you know, the devil loves us in the dark.
Oh,
He loves for us to think we're a singularity. He loves for us to be alone. So you can just be plagued. You're going crazy. You're broken. No one will love you.
yep.
You know, you're disgusting. If people knew this about you, and it's just ba, and it's relentless. So I had that shame track was just on loop in my mind. And it was a complete juxtaposition between what I was presenting, a happy, shiny,
Mm,
go-getter, everybody's friend. And those things were true, like in my heart, that's who I am.
right.
But when you're hustling, right? When you're doing that out of shame to feed the monster, it doesn't end well. And so yes, you're not hurting anybody, but you're killing yourself and bowing down to that. And so that nervous breakdown was equal parts a actual physical manifestation, and then it was unbelievable shame just going on repeat in between my ears. And you can't get well if you don't love yourself.
So that's a good transition point. Bring us now to the physical side of things, where you are. You know, you talked about your body shutting down. You talked about getting sick, and so
Right.
you've now, you mentioned earlier that the physical aspects of what you're dealing with now with chronic illnesses has really forced you, in a sense, to deal with all those other things. So tell us what is going on with you, and bring us to what you've experienced and learned as a
Right.
result.
So, okay. And I'll give the Cliff Notes version because I know you don't want me to talk your ear off for hours, but so I miraculously had my daughter. Nobody thought I could. So here's the thing. I have aggressive stage 4 endometriosis, which I just want to put out there first, because it is not just reproductive health issues, actually. That is the biggest misnomer for anybody, if I could tell you. If you're sitting at stage 1, it's still going to impact you, but it's going to primarily look like just reproductive issues, monthly issues, which is very serious in itself. Nobody should have to live that way. But when we run the gamut up to these higher level versions, it becomes a systemic disease that behaves a lot like cancer. It's not cancer, but it can have some of the impacts, which is what happened to me. It grew all over my insides. It attached multiple organs. Some of them started to fail, were blocked. So we're talking severity. So I struggled with endometriosis, little did I know, since I was younger. We now understand that the depression and anxiety that I was experiencing was actually tied also to the endometriosis because of systemic inflammation. So my
Mm,
brain was inflamed, my body was inflamed, which keeps your stress hormones up. You're in pain. And so now I understand that. So, and that's why I had infertility issues as well. But, you know, the average woman doesn't get their diagnosis for 10 years, and mine was that and longer, because you need to have surgery to know about it. You have to have surgery to confirm it. They can maybe see something on scans, but it's not until you actually have a surgery for confirmation. And that did not happen for me until I was 36. I had my daughter at 34. And like I was saying, after I was done nursing, the disease came back with a vengeance. Tumors, cysts, debris, adhesions. The doctors actually who have operated on me in the Tampa Bay area are the best of the best in the country. And they said that mine was one of the most severe that they have ever seen. So I get to be one in a million. Didn't think it was going to be about that. But so I started having severe symptoms and started having actually beyond the pain was horrendous. I started having difficulty walking. And that's what ended up where I went into the doctor, and one thing went to the next, and one step led to another, and they were seeing things that they were concerned about on scans. At first they wondered if it was cancer. We got that looked at. It was not. And that's when they said that this is stage 4 endometriosis. We would have to have surgery to confirm, and you're going to have surgery because the one we're looking at is the size of I think it was the size of a golf ball, and it was just getting bigger.
A cyst?
Yeah, on my ovary. And so when I was walking, it would pull and I'd start passing out. And then obviously I couldn't walk because the debris was on choking my organs and my abdomen. So I had a surgery at 36, came back a few months later, had another one. That surgery was the catastrophic one. I contracted internal sepsis, so not something I contracted during surgery. And because I was so fit and, younger and healthier at the time, when I went into the ER, I was sent away with sepsis. I had a couple of male doctors who were like, I could just send you home. And I was so adamant with them. I said, you will not send me home to die. And they kind of rolled their eyes. And then it took an the infectious disease doctor, an ID doctor. And he came in and he ran my blood cultures and he came back and he's like, yeah, you have sepsis. And the nurses told me, thank God for him that he got involved on the scene because they thought I was anxious. And I said, yeah, I'm anxious because I feel like I'm dying. And I was.
Wow.
The nurses said, thank God you're such a little pistol, because if this was 24 hours from now, you would probably be in the ICU losing limbs and dying. And they're like, we can't say that with the doctors around, but my female nurses were just good on you. I ended up getting sent home too soon. The sepsis came raging back at home. I was rehospitalized. And at this point now, they had to put a large PICC line in my arm and send me home. I was completely bedridden. I was a ghost. And my husband had to give me my antibiotics up my arm. I think it was like 2 or 3 times a day for a month. And then they were finally able to say that they had gotten it out. But at this point, it had been raging through me for 2 months on and off. And because of that, I have post-sepsis syndrome. So basically, it ruined my mitochondria, my cell health, my autonomic nervous system. So my body doesn't know what to do when I exert myself or when I get up and walk, and it doesn't know how to defend me from illnesses. So I learned how to walk again. I was in a wheelchair. I fought to walk again. And then all of it came. I had to end up getting another surgery after sepsis. And that was the darkest point of my life because that's when it was everywhere. And I had to find a cancer specialist. And he took everything. He took all kinds of organs and had to reconstruct. And he even said, I was an emergency surgery. And he said that he regretted not checking the box for video and images because it would have been one for the textbooks. And then it took me about 6 months to be able to learn how to walk again after that one. And then it came back. And they had to go in and reconstruct because I couldn't do some basic things that I needed to be able to do to live. And I'll leave it at that. People can fill in the blanks. And then I had to learn to walk again. And that was 1.5 years ago. I've been hospitalized. I've been in the ER since because of my autoimmune issues. My body will go into overdrive because it can't clear a virus, and the virus can kind of take over. They can lead to rigors, just really obviously severe flu symptoms that you can't get out of bed. Right now I have COVID for the 3rd time in the past 10 months. And I normally take about a month to get going after I get it. So
I just want to say,
and I know I need to talk about what I've learned. So, but
yes,
that's the
we'll get
bird's eye
there.
view. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. It was long.
No. and I'm glad to be, I'm just thank you, because
Mhm.
I can say that I know exactly what you're talking about, unfortunately. And
Yeah.
so much of the stuff that you're talking about, I'm shaking my head or nodding my head, I should say, because my wife, I mean, it's you were stage 4. She just got surgery, when we're recording this 2 weeks ago, stage 3. And,
I'm so sorry.
it was, her cyst that they found was the size of a baseball. Same place, same thing. When the pain from walking, the pain, it's just, and I know what it's like to, come around the corner and find your wife on the floor because she can't walk because of the pain and the dizzy spell, and her legs give out. And so I'm hoping that people, and we're going to talk about what you've learned and give them the hope. But if you're listening to this and you struggle, maybe not necessarily with endometriosis but just any chronic illness, is like, I want you, like, hopefully you feel seen. Because, and I think so many times, and my wife was told this at times too, that this is all in your head, right?
Absolutely.
And then when you push and you end up at Mayo Clinic, that only accepts point whatever % of people, you're like, I guess it wasn't all in our head, was it?
Yes.
And so I just, if you're listening to this and you're struggling with some of that stuff, like, keep fighting, right? Keep fighting and telling people, like, no, something is wrong with me. And I'm curious, because I think with my wife, what we found is that the body, in a sense, was fighting this, but there was for us, or I should say for her, there was, kind of a traumatic event. For you, do you feel like that nervous breakdown, in a sense, weakened your immune system, that then your body couldn't fight the endometriosis, or what do you attribute? I guess the sepsis came after, but what do you attribute? Like, was that nervous breakdown kind of in a sense, a traumatic event that then started the decline, or what was it for you?
I think that there's overlap, but I feel like they're kind of bookends to my story. So there, no doubt that we know from the research now that I think women with endometriosis have 7 to 8 times more likelihood of having depression, anxiety, mental health disorders, because it's chronic inflammation.
Mm-hmm.
Your body is under severe stress that compromises the brain, it compromises the nervous system, the immune system. So now, looking back, understanding that disease was growing and feeding and growing for my adult life, all of this stuff now makes sense, because there was a part of it that simply felt out of control. So I now know, oh, this was a comorbidity. This was the dark part we didn't know it was existing, right? We were treating my depression, anxiety as a manifestation of other things, but there was an actual physical issue that was creating the perfect petri dish for all of this. So, and then, I did a little bit better for a while, but I still couldn't kick it. And now I know why, because I had the endometriosis. It was everywhere. I was in chronic pain. I wasn't, and I just learned to tough it up, because I always had problems with my cycle. From when I was a teenager, I threw up from it. And I just thought that that's what happened. Back, I graduated high school in 2001. We didn't have the dialogue that we have now. I'm 42. Things have changed dramatically in the past 10, 15 years when we talk about mental health and women's health. Back then, nobody was talking about either. Yeah. So you just deal with those things in silence.
And by the way, for people listening who don't know, especially my male audience, endometriosis, and you can correct me on this, but from what I've come to understand recently, is that basically it's the cells, the uterine cells, basically start reproducing on the outside of the uterus and attaching to
Yes.
other organs and create these, kind of lesions that then just wreak havoc. And, and so, they can go on the colon, they can go on the gallbladder, they can go on the intestines,
The lungs.
and
Yeah.
the lungs, right? And you have to then get a hysterectomy, at minimum. And like you said, sometimes they go in there and they realize, hey, this is so advanced, so spread that they have to start really just taking so much out. And sometimes they have to cut things and reconstruct things. That was the big fear, for my
Right.
wife when she went in.
Absolutely.
And by God's grace, we didn't have to do that.
Praise the Lord.
But yet I know we were prepared for it because they don't know until they get in. So
Yes.
you go into surgery and you're like, it could be quote unquote routine, or it could be I end up literally changed for the rest of my life, not being able to function like I was going into the surgery. And yet, and yours was that, right? Having to
Right.
especially go in again. And so,
Yeah.
just so people are educated a little bit, they're like, what's endometriosis? I didn't know. My wife
You're
my
right.
wife came back a month ago and she's like, I have endometriosis. I'm like, what is that?
Yeah.
And it's what I've been shocked by, Kimberly, and you are one of these people, is, and I think we had this podcast scheduled before my wife went through this.
Yes. Yes.
Is how many people, my wife's been open about it. She's a very private person, but she has felt like the Holy Spirit has told her to be more open and uncomfortably open because there were so many people saying you're making this up, or you're crazy, or you don't have the pain you have, or it's not as severe as you think it is. I'll just say, even right before she got her surgery, there was a male doctor who told her, there's no way you need pain medication for your monthly cycle. And she's like, you have no idea how painful this is.
Not to interrupt, but just, here's an anecdote. When I went into early labor for my daughter, they hooked me up to the machine. And then when I was just sitting there cool as a cucumber, a couple winces. And the nurse goes, oh, whoa, you're having big contractions. I was like, oh, I am? She's like, yeah, look at the monitor. And the monitor is spiking. And I'm just sitting there. And I look at my husband, I'm like, you know why? This is not touching the endometriosis pain. This is not touching it. And that alone was just such an illuminating moment of the fact that the pain that I have endured from this disease and the surgeries is a 10. A 10.
Yes.
Nothing has touched it in my life.
It's funny you say that. The last about month before my wife got the surgery, there was a time, and she was literally just doubled over in the bathroom, and she said, and my wife had both of our kids naturally, so no pain medicine, no epidurals, nothing. That's how she wanted to do it. And she said, this is worse than childbirth. This is worse than childbirth. And it was then that I knew how bad this was. Like that put it into perspective. Here's a woman who had natural childbirth with both kids, and she's doubled over and she's saying this is worse than childbirth. And that's the level of pain that she went through, and that's the level of pain that you've gone through as well.
Absolutely.
So now that we've put that in a sense in perspective for everyone, and that'll make sense now, I think, both to the female audience and the male audience. You've said some incredible things, at the beginning of this podcast, about suffering and pain. And, you said in the beginning that in a sense, like this suffering and this pain has allowed you to really, for lack of a better term, kick the people pleasing because you've had to. So
Absolutely.
Explain to us what you've what you've learned through this in your most beautiful, poetic way that I know you
Oh,
do.
thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, this is like a whole book, and that I hope I can have the capacity that the Lord lets me write one day. So again, let's do the bird's eye view. I would say that one of the big takeaways is when you come to the end of yourself and when you are suffering more than anything else, that is a make or break moment where you get to decide, do I love the giver or do I love the gifts the most? And the Lord already gave us enough of himself day one. He doesn't owe us anything else. But we become accustomed to his good gifts. We take them for granted. And we tie his love and our goodness and even our pride. We tie it to all the good things that are going on. But when I was bedridden and lost my friends and my community and my job, there was gossip going around that I wasn't really ill. Just like awful things. And in a Christian community too, which is just something else I'm having to walk through. But you know what? It's grown my relationship with the Lord in such an intimate way that I realized what is going to sustain me in this is going to be faith, love, and poetry. It is going to be loving the giver and not his gifts. And Tim Keller has a gorgeous, gorgeous sermon that held me in one of my darkest nights of my life that I came across. And it's, you can find it online. It's called Heman's Cry in the Darkness. And it's on the Psalm. I believe it's Psalm 88 that closes with darkness is my closest friend. And it talks about, are you going to, as long as you keep talking to God, that's what matters. And are you going to cling to him when darkness is your closest friend? And so I think this is a roundabout way to say that if you are going through unbelievable suffering, allow it to bring you to a place where you seek your Father above all else. And you will have a transformational experience that in my 42 years, and of course, I know I'm going to live in 10 and I'm going to go, oh, that 42-year-old knew nothing. And then I'm going to live another 10 and, oh, that 52-year-old didn't know very much. But what I do know for sure right now is that suffering in some twisted way is one of the greatest gifts to grow our character and our faith because it brings us to the ends of ourselves. And any self-delusion that we had about ourselves and our own goodness, it all fades away and you get an unbelievable clarity about who am I going to be? What am I going to believe? And I got to the point where I had no reason to keep going except for a few beautiful souls that were in my house. My mother, my husband, and my miracle daughter. And that was the love. You know, everything burns off and fades away. Makeup, jewelry, esteem, accolades, certificates, degrees, popularity, all of that burns away. It's just dross. And then the other thing was the poetry, right? And I got to understand God as an artist. He created first an unbelievable capacity for love and redemption. And he came to me in vision. He came to me in poetry. He came to me in my garden bed in ways that were just so transformational. And so anybody who's going through suffering, I would just say, please don't lose the faith. Double down. And because you suffering has nothing to do with how much God doesn't or does love you. He loves you immensely, and he's closer in your suffering than ever, right?
We'll be right back after this. You know, it's funny. I was thinking in just one of my times with the Lord this week, because this season, not only have we gone through this with my wife, but all of this has happened, so in a sense, her, she had an accident that really started this whole decline for her. weakened her immune system, the anxiety, the stress, the physical, broken back, things like
I'm so
that.
sorry.
That then, the doctors say is like the body started attacking itself and shutting down, and these things start rising to the top. And that accident happened the same month that I'm like, I'm an alcoholic, right?
Oh my.
And I gave up drinking. And on one hand, I'm like, Lord, thank you, right? I can't imagine, and neither can my wife, her walking through this with me as a drunk, and no doubt, right? Like seeing her in the state that she is, and just being able to pick up so much more responsibilities around the house and whatnot. If I were drinking, it would just be, it would be, I just can't imagine what life would look like. So on one hand, I'm like, thank you, Lord, right? Thank you, Lord, for bringing me to the end of myself, that now I'm able to be there for my wife. But then on the other hand, it's like, and we can talk about this too, as your background in counseling is like, I joke that, getting to rock bottom was the easy part. Like that happened on its own. It took care of itself. The stone was rolling down, right? It's then crawling out of that, and the work that you have to do on yourself, and the mental health, the counseling, and just all of that stuff, that I'm like, Lord, can we just like be done with this already? And to your point, there was just a reminder to me of like, I have become so close to the Lord in these last 2.5, 3 years than ever before. And I know there's people that listen to this podcast, especially probably my family and friends back home that knew me growing up, that are like, who the hell is this guy? Right?
Yeah.
And you know what I say? Same. Who the hell is this guy? I don't know. Right? And that doesn't mean that I don't have outbursts of anger, and, I say stupid things to my friends, and, we joke about whatever, you know what I mean? But man, I can say for sure that these hard times has brought me to a relationship with the Lord that is so sweet, that I say, I'm like, Lord, if things start going well, like, I'm a little scared.
I feel that way. Yeah, I know that.
Yes. Like, it has been such a sweet time that I'm like, if everything were going well, I kind of am like looking at myself and know myself enough that I'm like, man, I'd be quick to just throw him out and be like, and just rely on myself.
Yeah.
And so you say you feel that way too?
Yeah. I've even talked about it before, that I want healing like nothing else, and I will take it if the Lord gives it. Trust me. But there is a double-edged sword there that I know, there by the grace of God go I, because I've said I'm frightened. How quickly would I go back to my old ways? And that I never want to forget this sweetness. And it's been 5 years, so it's getting harder for me to remember life before. And I think it's getting harder for me sometimes, if I'm going to be vulnerable, to have the hope that it will be different in the future. I'm not in an emergency area that I was in, so I thank God for that. But I'm kind of in this purgatory where I really can't get out of the house. So I'm not in ERs, I'm not having surgeries, I'm not in the hospital, praise the Lord. But I would love to be able to get out more and have a life. But then at the same time, what comes busyness and self-sufficiency and distraction. And I hear you.
What is the outlook, as you talk to me right now, for yourself?
Oh, that is the question we all want an answer for. I am slowly going in the right direction. I do PT when I can. I think the big thing is I'm going to start seeing a functional medicine doctor now that we're out of like emergencies, recovering from surgeries, getting hospitalized, being on all kinds of medications, trying to turn off my immune system so it won't attack me. Well, now it's like so depressed that it doesn't want to do anything. So we are trying to go on that journey, so Lord willing, we can try to get my immune system better and my inflammation, because another thing that I have with the potpourri of autoimmune disorders is inflammatory bowel disease. So it's not like the IBS. It's actually so much worse. It's a constant inflammation. And so it makes it a battle with my diet. So dialing in and doing pretty much everything that we can do to get my body to calm down and defend me against illness, because that way I can get mobility back, right? And that way I could get stronger. Because the other thing is I've never had a chance since all of my bedridden times. I never had a chance to get a strong new norm. I haven't had that chance yet. So that's what we're praying for.
And that's what we will be praying for as well.
You.
Before we go, I think, I want to relate this all in a sense to, despite all this,
Mm-hmm.
you've said, I'm going back to school. You're
Yeah.
in the process of getting your doctorate. So I think you have an MFA, is that right?
I'm an MFA dropout, actually.
which I feel like is the best MFA. Like, if you're truly like
super
a creative,
legit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Then of course you would have dropped out of your MFA.
Yeah. So no, I'm an MFA dropout, and I wear that badge very bravely, though, and happily, because I was getting mocked for my faith, and the Lord made it very clear. You can chase the world's esteem, or you can chase me. And I got up and walked out of a lecture. It was very awkward, right in the middle of one. And I just got up and walked out because of some of the stuff that the professor was saying. It was extremely disturbing. And I called my mom and my uncle, and I said, I'm going to drop out, because it was a residency where you go live there every semester, and then you work with your professors from afar up in another state. And my mom and my uncle were stayed over, spending time together waiting on me. And I called them. My uncle's a take-no-nonsense outdoorsman, like blood on the knuckles, like New Englander, right? And he's like, I'll come over there and get you right now. I said, no, you're not. I'm a grown woman. I'll finish this residency. Then you could come get me, and I'm not going to go back. But no, I have my MED in English, and then I have my bachelor's in English. And then so I'm an English professor, and then I'm doing the counseling. And then my big baby that I have to talk about outside of my beautiful daughter is the way back to ourselves.
Yes. So please talk about the way back to ourselves, because I think that, in essence, this is how I found you, is because of that work that you're doing through Substack, but the magazine. So talk about the way back to ourselves and how you've incorporated all of this stuff.
Yes.
The English,
the God thing,
the breakdown, the faith, the traumatic chronic illness, now working on your counseling degree. How have you incorporated that into the way back to yourselves, and what is that?
Okay. So when I had sepsis, and I know this sounds wild, I was getting fever dreams, and this is before I lost my job, before I knew I was going to have 2 more surgeries after that, before I knew all of the things that were going to happen. So it makes no sense. And I love the mystery of God. And so I was getting these images of the mountains, of course, which we talked about earlier. And I was like, we got to find a way back to ourselves. Like, there's got to be a way. There was a lot of tension going on in the country, which was really breaking my heart. I have friends that are Democrats and friends that are Republicans. Like, I keep very diverse company. I thrive on that. And watching just people just tear each other up and get more divided. And then I'm battling illness. And so I kept on saying that. And I ended up writing this treatise, during my illness, which again is nonsensical, 30 pages of just, how to get back to ourselves with family, with life, just me writing through this prayer and this plea. I couldn't shake it. And so I was back at work for a little while before I got ill again, and I got COVID, more COVID. And I said to my husband, will you bring my laptop? He's like, oh boy, here she goes. He's like, honey, you are sick and you have COVID. You just need rest. I was like, I know, but I'm going to go crazy. Please bring my laptop. He's like, oh, here we go. So he brings it. He's my biggest fan that way. He's always supported me, even if there's some eye rolling because I'm trying to do too much. And I built a website during my COVID stint back in 2022. And literally, I was like, it's just going to be a blog. And I've told the story. If 50 people read it, man, that would be great. What a great outlet.
Yeah.
And what's wild is I abstained and left all social media for like 6 or 7 years. I am a Luddite to the core. I wanted to be embodied. I wanted to live a small private life. I wanted to focus on my miracle daughter. But I only went back to Instagram to say, hey, I almost died. I just wanted to connect with people. This is what the Lord is doing. And the rest is history. And that's when I know this is a God thing. He gave me a vision. I ended up losing my job, losing my community, losing my ability to walk for a prolonged period of time. And he gave me the energy and the vision and the heart and all these things. Nothing is wasted with God. All these things where I thought I overstayed. Like I was a yearbook advisor for 10 years at my inner city school. And I'm like, gosh, I'm just wasting my time. I was going to go into academia. Well, while I was a yearbook advisor, I learned to do photography professionally, graphic design professionally, copy editing professionally. We ended up winning a bunch of state awards with the yearbook. It was a $60,000 project that I ran on my own, all the accounting, bookkeeping, everything. What a waste of time, I thought. This is not what I planned for life. Well, guess what? All of those skills transfer to running a business and to making a website and doing graphic design. And then all my writing, all my teaching, and then me getting my illness and then going and studying my doctorate. And all of it was this beautiful concoction that is the way back to ourselves. We have like thousands of people involved now with a literary journal, publishing and editing services, counseling. It's just, I couldn't make it up. Let's just say it like that. You know that this is God walking in and just doing something wild. It's the mischief of God, as Stephen Roach says from Maker's Mystics. I love that. It's the mischief of God. And I literally wake up every day and I'm just like, please keep choosing me because I just want to serve. And the reason why, again, why did I stay in that high school classroom for 18 years and now I've been a professor for about 2 or 3? Again, did I waste my time staying there so long? No. The Lord had to humble me and teach me to be a public servant. No clout. It's not about you. It's about these kids. And he had molded my heart and excellence for that in devotion. This is not about Kimberly. This is about these kids. And now it's the way back to ourselves that anything that he gives me, that is my position. And to talk about, great work by Mark Sayers. I'm finishing it right now, Platforms to Pillars. Do we want to be platformed people? And I know you talk about this all the time. And it resonates with me very deeply. Is it about platforming ourselves or is it about being pillars for Christ? That we get to be a humble pillar, helping to uphold something that is so much more important and so much more holier. So much holier than we are.
You know, I'm thinking back, again, as we're recording this, I'd seen something yesterday that just upset me so much. And I don't know, I'd like to think it was righteous anger. Maybe it was 75% righteous anger and 25% just anger.
Yeah.
Of just, you know, I just can't stand Christian influencers. And, and there are probably some people who, you know, listen to my stuff and they look and they're like, well, you have this many followers and these many, like, you're a Christian. Maybe but I don't want to be. And I had seen something yesterday of just like, where it just reeks with self-aggrandizement, humble brags. And I just wish more people like you, Kimberly, were the face of what it looks like to be a Christian influencer.
That's people very kind of you.
So weak
in Christ,
best way possible. You know, and don't be mad at me for saying this, and I guess I can edit it out if you are. But like, Kimberly's doing this from bed, because she's had COVID for 2 weeks and is unhealthy and there was a chance we weren't going to be able to do this, right? And it's like, you know, to the Christian influencer that I saw that post yesterday, and they're taking videos of their swag bags because, you know, all 10 of them are, you know, got tens of millions of followers, and you know, they're tagging their merch brands in it. And I'm just like, we need more of the people who are doing their podcasts from bed, because they are just so focused on, the Lord gave me this message. I'm going to literally pull myself up to do this podcast because I hope that it makes more of Jesus. That's what I want. And so if you're listening to this, like, and you just, first of all, Kimberly, where can people go if they're listening to this and that resonates with, you know, all we just said and what you're talking about resonates? Where can they go to get the way back to ourselves?
Yeah. And it's easy to find because I think we've kept the handle on branding the same across. So the way back to ourselves with the number 2, and that would be the Substack and the Instagram and the website. So the way back to ourselves.com, at the way back to ourselves, and then the way back to ourselves at Substack. And then also we have a podcast that just came back from season 2, and really been enjoying doing that and talking to wonderful people. I couldn't do without the help of my producer and great friend, Edward Holmes. And so that's called The Way Back. And you can find that on Substack, Apple, Spotify, wherever you can listen. And then I have a couple of poetry books that are out. That one directly chronicles my physical illness and coming back to life. It's called Of Wings and Dirt. And then my other one is Exalted Ground. And that has more of a forward-facing approach, and it's breaking things up to lament and to praise, and for those who create. And so it really ministers to the reader at the different seasons of life that they find themselves in. So,
and where can they get those books? Those books?
They're on our website, The Way Back to Ourselves, on Amazon, and then a lot of that is up through anywhere else that they're sold online. So Barnes and Noble, etc. Yeah.
So I say all that because if any of this resonates, please, I'd love for you to check out The Way Back to Ourselves and support Kimberly's work, because you literally are helping her rise from bed and give the message that the Lord has given her. And so, Kimberly, I'm so glad. This has been so encouraging for me as, you know, my wife and I walk this season. And just thank you for the message that you're bringing of not saccharine hope, but I think true hope.
Absolutely.
And that true hope looks like, I want to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
I want this to end. I know it may not. And if it doesn't, the Lord is still good. And I think that's the hope that we need more. So I appreciate you for bringing that message. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This was wonderful.
You know, I think we forget sometimes, even if we know it in our heads, we forget in our hearts the idea that Jesus said that in this world you will have trouble. And that's been true for me. It's been true for my wife. It's been true for Kimberly. And I think her perspective is so good. And like I shared at the end there, like she's doing this interview from bed. And I talked with her a little bit after. She's going to allow me to share some clips because I told her if I don't share clips, not as many people see it. And she's like, you know what? Not my will, but the Lord's be done. But we really do need more people like her. And I think, in a sense, that's your challenge. That's your call. You can change that. Share where you're struggling. Share where you are weak. My next tattoo, or I should say one of many of my next tattoos, is I'm going to get the Roman numerals 12, 7 to 10. And that's because of what I think has really become what has come to define this period of my life. And that's 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10. And that's where Paul talks about the thorn in his flesh. and that in his weakness, the Lord is made known. And if it's not, well, it's my life verse, I guess you could say, at least for this season. And in some ways, I think that's Kimberly's as well. So thank you for joining us. If you have any thoughts, you can go to christianalcoholic.com and you can share them with me. There's a form on my website where you can do that. Please go support Kimberly and the way back to ourselves. And if you like this podcast, please rate it. That goes a long way. And also be sure to check out lifeaudio.com, where more great podcasts. Lifeaudio.com is our partner, and they make this podcast possible. And there's many more great podcasts on their website. Love you all. We'll talk with you next week.